Living homeless in Alaska carries unique and often fatal risks. Winter is harsh here, and it is cold for about 6 months of the year, and the darkness decreases winter visibility, such as on roads. Homeless individuals here can suffer from cold weather exposure, which can come in the form of hypothermia, frostbite, or even death. Here at Hearths for the Homeless, we recognize those factors that affect our homeless population and our mission to provide winter safety to homeless individuals in Alaska through the construction and maintenance of small overnight heated shelters throughout the Alaska community in order to assist established shelters who maybe lack the space to accommodate all homeless guests. There are two schools of thought when considering the problem of homelessness in society. The first school of thought believes that homelessness is the fault of the individual, while the second believes it is a fault of society. Most shelters take an in-between stance between these schools of thought and often offer shelter to homeless individuals with the institution of rules. Most commonly, homeless individuals must be clean from drugs and alcohol when staying at a shelter. In Alaska, that rule has a larger impact than in other places, mostly because Alaska has a higher rate of substance abuse than anywhere else in the United States. That means that we have a larger amount of people who need assistance outside of established shelters. In 2017, 16% of our homeless population in Alaska lived outside of a shelter. Some of these individuals may have chosen not to stay in the shelter, but others would have gone to the shelter and then been turned away if there weren't enough beds. Both of these groups of people are vulnerable to the elements if they have to stay outside or wander outdoors at night. They might not have enough winter clothing. They might be under the influence of alcohol. Whether or not they've been turned away or chose not to be in a shelter, they still need to have a safe place to stay that's warm overnight. Perhaps they've realized this problem, but many companies in northwestern United States have begun to assist the homeless population more. One of these groups is the Community Supported Shelters Group, who developed and created a special homeless shelter called the Conestoga Hut, and they build them in communities with a program that individuals must partake in if they're going to stay in them. These are a longer-term form of shelter than what Hearths for the Homeless wants to do, mostly because individuals can stay there for longer than one night. But there's also the addition of the fact that Conestoga huts would probably not hold up in Alaska's climate conditions during the winter and winter weather. Therefore, for our purpose of decreasing the amount of Alaska's homeless deaths during the year, especially in the winter, we still want short-term shelters. But we believe that by modifying the Conestoga hut to be suitable for Alaska temperatures and also making sure that it is definitely a short-term overnight shelter, we can assist homeless individuals by placing these around the community in easily accessible places during winter months. That way, individuals will have an emergency location that they can stay overnight that will help them survive the Alaska climate. Just because whether they or society has failed them does not mean that they deserve to experience cold weather exposure. And now that you've heard a short overview of what Hearths for the Homeless intends to solve, and a little overview of how we intend to solve that, please join me in listening to Mr. Scarver, and he's our Director of Research and Legal Studies, and discussing case studies and legal opportunities in depth, and as well as Mr. Song, our treasurer, in discussing both short-term and long-term costs and how we intend to overcome those.